Hello, welcome to our first unit of the second part of the drawing basics. The second part deals with the entire body, and at first, today, we want to work with the proportions in itself. Let us come to the aims of our work. The first one is the aims in itself. Okay, then we come to our first aim, learning the proportions of the entire human body. Second one is we want to improve our drawing skills a little bit by doing this. And the last is we want to prepare with this sketch the following units. Okay, I hide these parts and then we start with our work. Okay, the start part, the aims part, here is our drawing area. Beside, I want to explain some Photoshop basics. First one is to creating a new layer. The most of you use the plus button here below on the right. I want to offer you the short key. This is Control Shift N. Control Shift N. The advantage is if we need, we can mark the layer with a color, we can rename, and we can define the mode of the layer. In my case here, I only name it with the word guides and with one color, the bright blue. Here it comes. Then I want to create our base of the structure. That means a line in the center. My favorite tool is a vector-based tool, as in our head drawing lesson or unit. If you press the U button, you can find it here. This is the line tool. If you can't see, press longer. So you can better see when I drag it here in the center. And then you choose. Consider for our work, I would say is the best then if we change it to pixels instead of path. And then we have to define the weight of the line. Define the weight of the line. My favorite is 6 pixels. Here it comes. And I choose all the time a blue color for the preparation, the sketching. I said often I want to explain it in another video. Yeah, I can say this is a sketch before the sketch. On real paper, it helps us to, survive the mistakes. Okay, my favorite color is here by mixing the CMYK values. When you click one time here on the foreground color, you get the so-called color picker. And based on my profession as a printer, far away past, I use often these values. If you want, you can do two. Otherwise, you choose what you like. 50, 30, 20, 0. Then I close. Then I have this color. And measured by the eyes, I check where the center is. Hold the Shift key to limit in the vertical direction. And now I have this line. Whoa. I forgot to press the OK button. Sorry for this is really fun. Yeah. Okay. 50, 30, 20, 0 again. And then OK, not closing. Yes. And then I do again. Here it comes. Bright gray, bluish gray or whatever. Okay. The first, knowledge that we have to learn is that we have 8 heads over each other to define the height of the human body, the entire one. In the real world, I would say we are about 7 point whatever, 4, 6, 7 again. When I do this with my students, I measure often the head and then I divide it against the measure of the entire body. And as a result, we have this 7 point whatever. But sometimes 8, sometimes more for the character design, possibly for Super Mario, we use about 3 heads. This is a cartoonish guy, and we have to see the facial expression on the small Nintendo screen. For the superheroes and comics, especially DC or Marvel, we use sometimes 9 or 10 heads. Okay, all in all, 8 heads, I would say, are really suitable because it's near the reality, often is the reality, and we are able to divide it against 2. This helps really. Okay. We want to solve this here in Photoshop with this Align and Arrange tool. Okay, for this I create a new layer without renaming, Control-Shift-N. Then I use this tool again. Take, yeah, what would I say? I would say more 2 fingers from above. It's not a real measure here, but for your feeling, possibly this is the distance to the edge. I use the Shift key again to hold the horizontal direction now. Then I duplicate this layer here 8 times. That means the best is Control J as a short key for doing this. Control J, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can read it here. Copy 8. Then we take the last one with the V key, means the move tool. V key leads to the move tool. And then I drag it by holding the Shift key again down. Leave a little bit more space than above. And then I select all marks or guides that we create here, except the vertical one, by holding the Shift key and click on the first layer. Then we go up. Automatically, we have this here in our control bar when we are on the Move tool. But we need this Arrange part. In my case, it's hidden here under the 3 points. Here is it. And now I press this. I repeat, here in my case, 3 points. And the second one in the row of 3 here. Okay. And when we count it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it has to work. Then I press Control E for merge down the layers. I repeat, Control E. Then I do the same with the guide here in the vertical line. Control E, merge it down. Then I reduce the opacity here in this layer window above, where the opacity remark is, to possibly 40. Here it is. Okay, then I lock the layer to avoid that I work on this layer. Okay, I create a new one for sketching. Here it comes. Then I take my pen, reduce the opacity of my brush now. The brush key is the B key. Here it comes. Then you can find the opacity here above. Here the controls for. That means first one, opacity controlled by pressure of your pen and size controlled by pressure. Okay. In the German version of Shortkeys, you can find the first explanation in German if you can work with. You can define own shortkeys for increase and decrease brush tip. In my case, it's the German, the so-called Umlaute in German, these Ü and Ä. In English, often we use others, but later I want to explain. Okay, later means in another video. Otherwise, you can use this here for size, means directly in the control bar. Or what helps too. Okay, that's not so suitable. Okay, I come back to my standard color here, 50, 30, 20. Sorry for interruption. And I'm on the new layer here and reduce opacity by pressing on my keyboard the number I want. imagine if you press a 3, you get a 30. If you press a 6, you get a 60. Okay, I start with 220 because of my giantly pressure. Okay, here it comes. By the way, it's not the best brush tip here. You can see it's a little bit too soft. I go up again and change to the hard round. Later we can deal with own brush tips. Okay. I go on. By the way, I want to create really soft and, yeah, in a way, diffuse, not so exact lines here. That has to be a little bit intuitive. Possibly you change to 10 if this is too much pressure. Okay. But before we go on, I want to deal a little bit with the basic proportions. Okay. Means I create a new layer again. Now I offer you another possibility for the straight lines. If you are on the B key, means on the brush tip, and you have a suitable size. We do these lines here long. I start in the center of to find the measure in the best way. Hold the shift key, go in one way and then in the other way. This is the beginning here, and where the feet stands on is the ending. And then we count the half. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it is. And here I bring into the next line. And then we discuss a little bit. Not really discuss, I explain. It's a term of my lesson. Yes, okay. The half. I write it down here beside. Is where the legs nearly begins. We can say where the bone of the upper leg goes into the pelvis bone. I make a really simplified sketch here beside. I do this on the next layer to find the best position in the next step. I create the half of the pelvis bone here. Looks a little bit like a butterfly in the simplification especially. Here's the spine comes into, here's a hole into, here we have another curve. Normally here's a little bit subdividing. And then we have this little bit like a stick here with a grip on bone part that goes into the pelvis. And when we mark this part here, this is what you can touch often and you can feel really. This part. Often we use in art this as a center of the body. That means same measure above and below has to be here in this line. Okay, I merge it down and do the Latin and English word for description. This is the so-called Trochanter major. Here it comes. The big one, the major. Okay, there's a Trochanter major. For refining, possibly a helpful explanation for you, when you go to the L key, you can use one of the lasso tools. It's not necessary that you do, but I want to show you a little bit the correction here. Often I prefer the polygon one for manual work, especially for the mouse. And then you can possibly cut it out of or copy or move or whatever. I want to transform. I want to do this a little bit smaller. And I do this by pressing Control T. That means free transform. And here I bring this at a better position, a little bit smaller, and then I press the Enter key for saying okay, and Control D for deselect. Control D for deselect. Okay, I'm satisfied, really. It works. Okay, Trochanter major as a center of the entire body. Next one is the quarter from above. There is where in my lessons the students said all the time, nipples by man. And I think it works really. It's a little bit above before, a little bit higher before the big pectoralis major ends, the breast musculature. Um, and I do here as a quarter. Whoa, I have to reduce again. Here it comes. This is a quarter. And often we think that the center of the body is the belly button. The belly button is on the height of not legs, three heads from above. Here it is. I write it beside belly button. And then the last one, 3/4 from above. This is directly under the knees. Here's 3/4. In this English version, I want to deal with the male body. If you are interested in the female version, this is in the German version of this version again, yes, in this unit. Okay, I add in a really rough and not perfectly visible way the neck part. Then I come to the shoulder part, go down to the waist. Then I take a separate part. It's often for male a little bit too high here, but nearly for the pelvis bone it works, I would say. Often the medicine books speak another language. They reduce often the bone, but when we feel it sideward, I think this is the best position here in this area. Okay, we spread a little bit the legs because of the idea that we can use it as a character design creation for game art or animation in 3D. So we have defined poses for this. One is the A pose. That means the arms goes in the direction of the letter, or the big one. And the T pose is what we do now. The spreaded arms looks like wings or a T a little bit. Okay. And this idea of preparation of animation or game art leads us to the parallel view in every height. Means we have a flat view on the foot or both feet, so that we have this strange view here. Not, yeah, in realistic perspective, we watch on the feet. Here we are in this. That means that is for all the points of the body. But in this case, we lay on the ground with the camera. So this is the view that we have here, especially on the feet. Okay. This is really sketchy, a little bit like children's drawing at first, the entire body. And this is not perfect here. Looks a little bit like X-orientated legs. Later we correct this a little bit. Okay, the next base is a little bit comparable to this eye level and the face on the half. You can see this in the unit with the head. Is the spreading of the arms. When you compare the entire measure of the spreaded arms and inclusive the body, we have the same or more measure like the entire body. That means we can use our vertical line, our guide layer, directly, and we duplicate it by pressing Ctrl J. Here it comes. Then we go with the V key on our move tool, and then we go up in our control bar. And then before we do, we press Ctrl T, and here automatically appears our control bar, our measures and angles that we need. In this case, we need the 90-degree. It doesn't matter what kind of direction, it has to be 90-degree. Okay, then I move it up this line, bring it to the shoulder height, and we count here 1, 2, 3, 4. That means it's perfectly in the center. And here is the end of the fingertips. When we do this the first time, it seems really giantly. When we follow the medicine books, they would say for men about 106%. That means a little bit longer than the entire height of the body. For women, often about 103. I would say 1-to-1 is okay. That means 100%. Possibly we go a little bit over, but it seems so giantly when we do this the first time, and sometimes a little bit strange. Okay. I merge it down here to my guide layer by pressing Ctrl E again and lock it. But before I reduce a little bit the opacity again so that it's not so heavy in the foreground. Okay. I realize that sorry for scattering again. I realize that I've forgotten the German class, this width of the shoulders. The width of the shoulders can we define by the head too. But for this, I want to refine it first a little bit, the head, and then we cut out of and duplicate and so on. Okay, I go into my sketch layer here. It's not a sketch layer, I would say. This is a sketch layer. Bring it up, mark this with the color orange, call it sketch by doing a double click, and use giantly letters for better reading. And check. There has to be the head. Okay. This is what we use now. And I lock the layer below again. Okay. Back on my blue pen, back on 30% opacity. For the learning of the head, I said already you can use the other video, but one remark, we have a ratio of 3:2. That means 3 parts for the height of the entire head and 2 parts for the whole width. Okay. This is our head now. I think it's enough for a measure. I duplicate this layer. Control J again. Move it sideward, at first to the left. We ignore the ears, try to hold the same height by holding the Shift key again. Then we do again on the other side. Control J and drag it on the left. Sorry, on the right. Here it comes. This is my favorite to determine the width of the shoulders. You can see this is not the smallest head. And in this case, it seems a little bit exaggerated, but consider when we, I create a new layer, create the deltoideus. This is the musculature of the shoulders, and hidden under this musculature is the joint of the shoulder. And when we measure it now, it works neat. Here you can see. But consider, we have a little bit, possibly an exaggerated width of the head. That's why it works not on the best. We want to correct. I deal with this problem at first by deleting of my duplicated layers here. Then I take the sketch layer with the head on and go to Control T. And here I deactivate the chain in between for the proportions. And I move it a little bit inside in both parts, but on both parts. possibly not so much. We can use it here directly with possibly 98%. Then I check the position with the arrow keys on the keyboard. And then I duplicate this layer again by pressing Ctrl J and move again left and Ctrl J right. And often in different books, we have the explanation of horizontal heads. We do. I duplicate again. Then I press Ctrl T again for free transform and use the angle definition with 90° and bring the horizontal head here in this position above, lying in the way on the rest of. And here you can see it's the same distance. It's caused by the ratio of the head. That means 3 for the height means here 3 for 1/2. All in all, 6 for the entire width. When we duplicate this head here above, we have 6 again, 6 parts. Okay. I press the Enter key, press Ctrl J. So I have a duplication here. And then I want to turn it in the 180°. Ctrl T, 180, Enter key, and movement on the right, holding the Shift key again. And here you can see this giantly mess of heads. Okay, I go back to my line tool, this vector-based one, by pressing the U key. I offer you here on the toolbar again, this one. And yes, I confess I do this now on this mess of heads, but before I merge down. If you want to do the same, you can press possibly all the time, Control E, 1, 2, 3. I want to stay on my basic head here, but the rest is not so important. This is only for explanation. Okay, here I bring on my line. And often for the explanation, I drag it down really here, so that we have a little bit orientation for the entire body. For the female version, sometimes we can use it a little bit for the pelvis bone, but it's not really necessary. So only to check, only to have an orientation. And not often, not perfectly suitable. That's what I want to say. Okay. Looks a little bit symmetrically, I would say. Then I merge this last line down, and then I reduce the opacity of the whole construction. Here you can see. Then I lock this layer 2, check what is here. Okay, this is what we can use for a sketch. That's why I bring a little bit in order in my layer window here. Okay. I would say it's time to go on. But first I refine the body a little bit, and then I go into the arms. The arms. I correct my speech. For learning English, yes. Okay. Symmetrically on both sides, I create this deltoideus. I repeat the shoulder musculature. By the way, here we can use the following explanation. That means not especially for this shape. Often it helps to do edgy shapes instead of perfectly round, means for the construction. This is not really natural, but it helps us to hold the direction or define the directions. When you do this in this way, it's possibly not the best. For the explanation, I change here fore and background color by pressing the X key, but it doesn't work now. Okay, I don't know why. That's why I do this manually. I go to the foreground color and use here my favorite for a dark brown, 60, 80, 140. Yes, often I create this sepia feeling with this kind of beige or yellow background and brown as a refining color. When I do the refining here now, I follow the defined direction, but I make it smooth for the clean work. So I have at the end a curve too, but it has three defined clear direction. That directions, it helps us to define shapes a little bit when we do this often edgy in this construction part. Okay, let us come to more details here. Here I create a, sorry, I have to change the color. Here I create a little bit of dent from the collarbone to the deltoideus. Often we have a little bit of subdivision here from the pectoralis major. This is, I said already, the breast musculature. I do this a little bit like an, stylized armor of Batman or whatever here. Or a soldier of the Roman Empire in the faraway past. Okay, here comes the latissimus dorsi. This is normally not really visible when we do this posture of spreaded arms, but when we are able to bring it a little bit forward to show our perfectly trained hero body, then we can do. Normally it's flat here in this posture, but looks much better in this idealistic idea. That's why I do here. So we can talk about this musculature. For the waist part, consider that we have to have more than one head here. This is not natural when we reduce it under this measure. Okay, in this male construction, I start a little bit later with this bone here, or pelvis bone. That means a little bit flatter and smaller, as in the female, I would say, standard version. Yes, it sounds often really stereotypically, but I think there's no other method to talk with male, to deal with male and female in this drawing part. Okay, musculature again. We have musculature in between the ribs, or we want to show the ribs. This is what we can do both here. Possibly in this exaggerated way, or we stay on the beginning here. Soft, not really perfectly visible lines. This is a little bit mechanical, what we do at first here. The abdominals goes from the sternum to this pelvis bone here. And it's divided in the middle. And often over the belly button, we have the so-called six-pack. Sometimes it's divided here too. Okay, then we do the beginning of the legs a little bit. Here we go from this bone. I do a little bit of curve in opposite direction. Directions, plural again. Here, this is the pelvis bone, this curve, and then it goes in a different or opposite way, and we follow this shape here to the trochanter major. But often for male, we have not so much distance here. Possibly a little bit exaggerated, but it helps us for the explanation. And then I go to the sometimes giantly quadriceps here. This is musculature to stretch the leg together with the musculature of the butt, the gluteus maximus. It helps us for the squats or knee bands in a way. Okay. I go down to the knee joint. Often I point out that we have this butt part here deeper in a lower level than this beginning of the legs. That's why I do this here a little bit hidden in shadows so that we have a little bit of view on the butt. Okay, when we do this really visible and athletic, we have a longer part of this quadriceps here over the knee inside. To the inner part, we have here in this area subdivision. Then we can see a part here. Later in this refining, I reduce it's too much, I would say. Often, or sometimes we can see here a dividing two. Quadriceps means 4 parts, but the fourth part is not visible really. But here we can count 1, 2, 3. Okay. When we bring out of, or yeah, when we bring the feet so much outside, we have to consider the position of the knee. It has to be outside too, otherwise we create so much torsion into that we destroy the leg. Okay, the outer part at first for the explanation. Consider that we have a oblique line here in the inner part, and normally it goes directly to this front part of the leg here, the shin part. Yes. Then we make this curve for this calf here. Come to the knuckles. And then I reduce a little bit the position. I use this line here to make it more straightforward, this foot here. You can see I do this edgy at first. Later we deal with the detailed version of the foot. Then I do the same here on the opposite, on the right. And consider all the time we can do this again and again. On paper with the blue pen, we don't have to use the eraser. We can draw over and over and over, and at the end we do the pencil version directly on, and then the light blue, it's not so much visible. Okay. Shin and calf again. By the way, you can touch it here inside as a sharp edge, outside as a smooth transition because of this shin musculature. Okay. And I try to hold the same direction as on the left. Okay. Control 0 leads us to the entire view. And then we want to deal with the arms. At first, I save a little bit by pressing Control S. When I do this here, for me, it looks like a little bit cartoonish style of Egyptian god or whatever. When we put on the hand here on the, in between the shoulder joint and elbow joint, and again here to the hand, it's nearly suitable. But when we spread it, we have more measure. But it's a little bit an orientation. When we move the arm into the waist part, we can define it as a kind of radius. This is what I do at first here. For our rough sketching, means I reduce opacity again to 20, bring outside a little bit the toolbar, create a stretched ellipse here for the upper part. And when you consider, we come from possibly here as a quarter part of a circle in a way. That means, so I have to correct. It's not the best. That means we start here and come to here. Yes, it's not perfectly geometrically, but as a imagination we can use. By the way, when we go down, looks a little bit scary here with this second deltoideus, go down with the arm, means it ends here with the elbow joint. And then important is that we can use as a measure in between the knee and the hand here below, so that we can say the hand of the entire arm nearly perfectly beside our body ends in this area, so that we have a space of about one length of a hand, sometimes only the width of the hand. I would say it's often hard to measure on the own body because we have to bend the body to test it. But we can check it on other people. And that means we have the distance of one hand here in between. Okay, I'll write it down here as a remark. One hand. Okay, let us go back to our T pose. I'll write it here beside T pose. Stretched ellipse again for the lower part here. It's often really a riddle what is longer, the upper or the lower part, the forearm or the rest here above. When we have a look on this Vitruvian proportion drawing of Leonardo da Vinci, here I would say the forearm is a little bit longer. When I test it here, often I would say, okay, forearm seems really longer than the upper part. My entire life I thought I thought this in opposite way. But the problem is where we start with our measurement. I don't know. Yes, I would say possibly a little bit the forearm is longer. In this case, I want to bring the hand in this position. This is important for our musculature here, so we can show a little bit the biceps. I zoom in so that you have a better watch on. Okay. A short explanation for the hand. I think this is a good idea to create another tutorial, especially for body parts. That means hands, feet, and so on. Okay, I want to divide, not so much light here, the entire hand. That means the base here, the palm, and the fingers. When we compare this with the longest finger of the other hand, we realize that we have possibly the same measure or the palm is bigger than. As an orientation, I prefer to do a half. It's here. And then I create, okay, possibly a curve to do the finger part. Okay. Then I do the same with the beginning of the thumb here. That means the thumb comes out. This is not based on books. This is when you test it, you can see the thumb comes nearly out of the palm where the quarter is. So when we do a bulk here for the beginning, and yes, it's really small. That's why I changed to the next smaller level of my brush tip here. And then we can bring up the thumb in this way. And here we have a little bit different to the other idea of curves. Normally, we have often curves like this. Here on the forearm, it comes up, and then it comes up in the opposite curve down. Here on the thumb, we have this here. Curve in this direction and repetition. Same in this direction. Check this here in the camera. Yes, you can see a little bit, I hope. Okay. Yes, these curves helps a little bit to define the entire shape. Okay. I do the same here on opposite. By the way, often students ask, can we use a reflection tool here by digital drawing? I want to show you. Yeah, where is it? Here it is. Here above, there's one you can do if you are able to use. Here in this case, I can cut out of the left part and duplicate and reflect, but it's not so intuitive, and possibly you realize in my last videos, I try to avoid stuff like this. Often it's really slow what we do here and really, yeah, based on traditional skills. Yes, I do the AI part later, but oh, it's like making music on a guitar or on a piano. Um, I would say we do this for ourselves, for learning and enjoying. But you can do if you have stress of deadlines or whatever. Okay, I go a little bit over. You can see here to reach this 100 and whatever 3 or 6%. Here comes the thump again. And then it's it. Okay. Before I end, I want to explain the construction of the feet at first. In a side view, we can say this shape follows a little bit the shape of a triangle, possibly in this way. And when you imagine this is a simplified three-dimensional object and you turn it in our direction, then we come to this here. I add this calf part and the join here. In this normal view, when we stand in front of this person, we have this view here. It goes up here. And this looks really natural. But in our parallel view, we have the problem that we have to bring this part here in the same level like this here. That's why I do this again. And it comes more in our direction. It looks a little bit strange in the construction too. It's hard to solve, I have to confess. Okay, this is the part that comes towards us. Then we watch a little bit inside. No perspective angle here. And then we go down and that looks like a whatever, a geometrical piece made of steel or whatever. But we can work with. This is what I try to do here. I zoom in and confess this is really too small, but our main topic is the entire body. That's why we reduce a little bit the focus on this here. Later we do again. Okay, at first I take the eraser tool. This is the E key. You can see the eraser tool, the standard here. And create a little bit space here so that I can work and you can see more. Yeah, the most of them is on another layer, I have to confess. Okay, here I create the biggest one of our toes. Then I bring the entire shape of the rest of the toes here into. And then I subdivide it. 1, 2, 3. And here I come a little bit into the shape and I confess, I do this possibly a part of a millimeter a little bit that I go up. Yes, it's hard to draw really, but it helps for the 3D modeling. Okay, I forgot to say some words about the shapes here. That means, okay, when we have a look on the calf part here, we have the most of mass here in this height here. Outside, it's much or really visible higher. For this, I deactivate these lines. For straight lines out of a rectangle angle, we can use one click here and hold the shift key and make the other click there. And so we have an oblique line by using the shift key. This is the most visible bulk here outside, much smoother and flatter than here on the calf part, visible calf part. For the knuckles is opposite, but not so much. That means that we have the inner knuckle higher than the outer one. And I repeat this part here. It has to be a little bit oblique, not so, mechanical. more smooth. But here is a real transition, seems straight, and here it seems oblique inside. Okay. What is important too? We can refine a little bit the face so that we can work on better in the next lesson unit. Sorry for the lesson. It's caused by my work as a lecturer. Okay, here the toes again. And here we come to the face. Okay, I said already, has to be the same measure above and below when we define the height of the eyes. You can prove this in a kind of MacGyver way. Press the M key and use the selection as a measure. And here I have to confess, I do this much too deep here, this line, you can see. That's why I do another one on another layer, so I can correct in the next step. This is my new line, and I check this level here and here, and this is much too high. And check again. Yes, we can use the range tool for this too, or you measure much better by the eyes. I think this is okay. And then I do the eyes inside here in this level. I do this a little bit lower because of this position. Then we have this eyebrow level over this for the face. We use now the halves all the time. That means from the eyebrow level to the chin in the center is the nose tip. Then this half of nose to chin means the lower part of the lips, possibly here, so that we can create the mouth here in this way. Often I prefer these edgy faces like this here. If you want, you can do too. Especially for males, I do this here for the forehead bone here beside again. Then in between the nose and the eyebrows, we have the measure for the ears. All these in a longer explanation you can find, I repeat, in the other video. Okay, a measure of, or when we do the same measure here and here is the same here again, so that we can define the beginning of the hair. And then we can go on in this way. And then it depends what we want to create, longer or shorter hair. I do this longer here above and shorter below. God, looks a little bit like the 1930s. Sorry. Or 1980s. The last part of. Okay, you can see the neck looks really long after the work with the details. And when we compare the entire head with the entire body, yes, we correct this in the opposite way before, but now I would say it seems better than we corrected a little bit more in the increasing direction, but we can do another one. I use a little bit the eraser here for the musculature and bring up this musculature called trapezius. So we can reduce the length of the head and of the neck, not of the head. Okay. And then I increase a little bit the head again because of, we can go over here a little bit, and this is because of the thickness of our lines, we can go under here a little bit. For this, I use my L key to come to the polygon lasso again, select the part that I want, because the most of the lines are on one layer. And then I go to the Control T and then I want to do this especially for the height. By the way, if you mark the 100% here with a double click, and then you use the arrow keys up you increase to 108 possibly. And I would say when you press Control H for height, okay. It looks not in the baddest way. Yes, I zoom in to correct. There's a problem because I'm in the selected area and then we get a warning all the time. Okay, I increase a little bit in both parts. Whoa, it seems too much. Sorry. The other one is possibly 104. Yes, we use the digital advantages to do. When you do this on paper, do this in the refining process with a pencil and use the outer part of the lines, and then we solve it in the same way. Okay. Control D for deselect, not visible selection. This is our result for today. Okay, I offer you the entire one in a bigger appearance. Okay, I repeat what we learned, hopefully, this unit. Okay, 8 heads for the entire measure of the body. The spreaded arms has the same measure or a little bit more than, the same measure as or than the entire body, if this is bigger. We can define 3 heads beside each other for the shoulder width, or in the horizontal direction, 2 heads. We can divide the entire body in the following way. In the center is the area where the legs begins. We can define the trochanter major as skeleton part for the center. We have the quarter from above a little bit before the pectoralis major ends. We have the 3/4 from above a little bit under the knees. We can say when we stand there as a soldier with in the straight position with arms beside the body, we have one hand, about one hand as a distance in between knee and hand. We can use often curves in opposite directions. Yes. As a repetition, we can say the entire hand covers the face, or in a horizontal way, we can divide with the hand 3 times the face part. 1, 2, 3, except me, the beginning of the hair. Okay. I think that was it. Yo, it's time to say thank you for watching, possibly thank you for working with me. The outlook on the next unit is we refine this work and then we add light and shadow. And the idea is to go on with this at first with AI, means a part of it comes in a design that is AI created, and then we use it as a kind of illustration in InDesign so that we can follow the idea of combining the worlds. Okay, thank you again. Have a nice day. See you. Bye bye.